I call this meeting to order. This is a regular meeting of the Northfield Public School Board. Today is Monday, June 13th, 2022, and the time is 6 p.m. This meeting is being live streamed and recorded. The recording of this meeting will be posted on the district website as soon as possible. Before we get started, I'd like to thank members of the public for attending the school board business meeting and to observe the work being done on behalf of all school district stakeholders. We appreciate the time you took to be here this evening. Dr. Hillman, we have some items in the table file.
Yes, in this evening's table file, we have several items in the consent agenda with some appointments, some increase, decrease, changes in assignment. And we have some resignations as well. Also included in the table file was the end of the year enrollment packet.
Okay, thank you very much. If there are no objections, we will add these items to the agenda as we move forward. Is there a motion to approve the agenda as presented? Made by Jeff. Is there a second? Second by Corey. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We now move on to the public comment section, and we have no public that wishes to comment tonight. So we'll move to the next section. Announcements and recognitions. Dr. Hillman.
And yes, I'm looking. I do not believe we have any announcements or. Okay, very good. Give me one moment, please. Yes, we have several announcements and recognitions here. So first, we would like to thank Deb Gottfried for stepping up and taking charge when we needed someone to run the district's Q COVID testing center. Deb started her work on October 28th, and over the course of 7 months completed 1,854 tests. We also want to thank Laura Turk for her assistance in filling in at the clinic when needed. We're very appreciative of their commitment to the district and to public health. The clinic provided an invaluable service to our staff, our students, and our community. So we have shut down the clinic. And so it is something that we are not able to continue for the summer, but they did make a substantial difference for the school year. And so we're so grateful. And we know that we were the community center for our students testing. And so I know it gave families a lot of solace that they could come here pretty quickly and get a test. And we had so many positive comments about Deb and her understanding and her support of families and what obviously was a very stressful time. We also want to congratulate our state tournament track and field participants. And we had a number of people who did very well. So Brecken Riley, Will Bowmaster, AJ Reister, Nathan Amundsen, Colin Graff, Devin Jacks, Austin Jacks, Joey Schultz, Colin Graff, Clara Lippert, Shelby Sveen, Nate Stevens, and Emerson Garley. Now those last two are golf participants. So for up to Shelby Sveen, they were track and field, and then Nate and Emerson are golf participants. And I know that several of these people placed, and I know that Shelby, we're excited for her. She placed second in the state in the shot put. So congratulations. And a number of others with Shelby also placed 5th place in the discus, and then a number of other people who placed on the top 10 in track and field. So congratulations to those athletes for their success in spring sports.
Excellent. And I know we have another announcement from Julie.
Yes, I just wanted to acknowledge the retirement of Ed Terry, who is the Randolph agriculture teacher and the FFA advisor. And as we know, our Northfield students participate in the Randolph agriculture classes and also our FFA participants as well. So we just want to acknowledge the difference that Ed Terry undoubtedly made in the lives of a lot of Northfield high school students. And, you know, we were had the opportunity to hear from a number of them just recently in terms of how much the Ed Terry and those programs meant to them. So we just want to acknowledge and thank him. He has taught for 51 years and 40 of those years were at Randolph. So we congratulate him and thank him for everything he did for NHS students.
Thank you, Julie. Any other board members want to add anything? Okay. We're now on to items for discussion reports, and we have 4 items tonight. The first one is policy committee recommendations, and we have 5 or 6 handbooks that we're going through. So I thought we could just take them one at a time. Did you want to fill in anything, Dr. Hillman?
No, I
What was
think
it?
that you'll have noticed that many of the handbooks that are coming forward for first reading tonight, the ECFE handbook, the Hand in Hand handbook, the Kid Ventures handbook, Portage, fairly limited changes because we, especially with the community education based programs, we really did a lot of updates last year. So you're going to see fairly minimal changes to most of the handbooks that are here tonight. So I'll just lay that out for you that the policy committee did a great job of going through and making sure that they're reviewing any of the potentially recommended changes.
Thank you. So we'll start out with the coaches and advisors co-curricular activities handbook. And just know that the people on this side have been through the policy committee approach. So we might not be as vocal as other people. So Tom, I saw you looking like you had something to say.
Yeah, just a proofreading thing. On page 14, near the, about 2/3 down under the state letter, it still lists cheerleaders. Just after the, just before the highlight, the bolded sentence, where it talks about receiving the N, it still lists
Okay, yep.
cheerleaders.
We will catch that. Thank you.
And then a question, and also jumping ahead to the Portage, but it relates to the or can I jump ahead or something because I'm thinking of it?
Is
Or-
it in this handbook or is it? a
Well,
different-
I'll do it later.
Okay.
Okay, sorry.
Any other comments on this handbook? Julie?
Well, I do have a comment and but it isn't around changes that are being made. I just wanted to talk through again where we are at around athletes moving up a level. And in terms of, as we know, 7th and 8th graders are able to participate in the Minnesota State High School League allows 7th and 8th graders to compete on high school teams. And I know we have been very intentional about figuring out a way to make, give 8th graders opportunity, but not, at the expense of our high school students. And so when I looked at the criteria, which is on page 12, we talk about how those decisions are made. And under that heading of criteria and process for approval of exceptional athlete, number 3 talks about all requests will be considered by the parents, students, coaches, and administration, and a unanimous approval is required for all parties. And I'm just wondering the definition of parents, student, parents, is that the parent of the student who's moving into that, the 8th grader that is going to be determined to be able to move into a varsity level sport. I think it's just a little bit confusing as to really who helps or who is part of that final decision-making process. And if we feel like that is really something that is described well in terms of the process, and then also just challenging around a unanimous approval by all parties. And, that's always a very difficult situation. One thing that, I understand why we're addressing it. I think it's important that we do, but I think every situation's so different. And I think one thing we lay out in this handbook, which I think is really important, is the philosophy around co-curricular activities. And we all know how valuable they are for a number of reasons for our students, but we also say that we want to ensure the greatest opportunity for success against all opponents. And competition's important, and winning is important. It has to be balanced against a lot of other aspects of being a part of a team, but we know that winning is important too. And so I think that, if you have these athletes who can clearly compete at a varsity level, which we know is not common, but it does happen. I just want to know that this process takes into account a number of those factors, and the fact that so many people are involved in that decision-making process. Final approval is made by the AD, so it seems a little bit confusing too, that a unanimous approval is required, but then final approval is by the AD. So again, it's not a change, but it's something that we've had conversation about, and I just wanted to revisit it. And I would assume that Bubba has had a chance to look at this as well as the new AD.
Yeah, he's not on the job yet, so
Okay.
he has, I don't know if he has been part of the process with Mr. Olson. I do think you make a very fair point, Julie, about in number 3, clarifying who the parents are. What this really means is that the parent of the athlete who would potentially play on varsity before their grade level would suggest that they do, the student athlete themselves and the head coach, because what we don't want is we don't want a parent pushing for a student to play up if the student doesn't want to.
Okay.
And then vice versa, if the student wants to, but the parent says, no, I want you, that we want to make sure that there's some agreement there. And then, of course, the coach of the head coach of the program, of course, being involved is important to make sure that there's a common expectation of what will happen if you move up, right? Because it's possible if I move up, maybe I don't get the same amount of time as I would had I stayed on the team that I was age eligible for, if that makes sense. And I do think that the activities director is intended to be the final part of that, to make sure that the entire landscape is being looked at as opposed to just that single sport. So as we look across, how are we handling these circumstances across sports, right? Not just in this one particular area. That part can be adjusted a little bit, Julie, to make that more clear.
Okay, thank you. So in essence, those opportunities, I just want to ensure that if there are students who really demonstrate the skill, that they do have that opportunity. And this process does lay it out, but I thought that, in terms of who is part of that decision, I wanted to be sure that was clear.
Yeah, I think that we can do some very minor modifications that make it ultra clear.
Excellent, thank you.
Other questions, comments on the co-curricular activities handbook? Okay, we'll move on to the next handbook. If you think of something, we can always come back. The next handbook is the ECFE Parent Handbook. Comments, questions? Okay, moving to the third handbook, the Hand-in-Hand Preschool Handbook. Then on to the Northfield High School Student Handbook. Oh, Julie, you have a question, a comment?
I had a question on the Northfield High School Handbook. On page 21, we have a senior graduation fee of $20. Do we offer any sort of free and reduced eligible for the graduation fee?
I do not know the answer to that, Julie. We will check. I believe that there is, but I will just double check.
Okay, thank you.
And if you recall, that fee is substantially lower than it was years ago.
Other questions, comments? Moving on to the Kid Ventures Handbook. Julie.
I have a question on early ventures on page 18. It talks about pets, and it said it has to have a signed permission before any pets are housed at the center. What pets would be housed at the center? Page 18. Under pets.
And we're talking Kid
We're
Ventures.
talking early ventures, yeah.
Do we have early ventures this time?
Just trying to look here. Oh, hold on. I must be missing it. Oh, hold on. Nope, it's in Patago. It's the Kid Ventures Handbook
Early
page.
ventures comes up afterwards. That's one of the ones we vote on.
Oh, got it. Okay.
Oh, that's,
So
yeah,
we'll
Tom
just-
just wrote that. Tom just pointed that out. I apologize for
No,
that.
no, I was worried I was not able to find it.
You know, and that's my fault. I was absent for the May 25th board meeting, so that was my fault. That was the first read. So that is totally my fault. I apologize.
So can we catch up with that when we?
Absolutely. Thank you.
Back around, okay. So, last chance for any questions or comments on any of the handbooks for the first reading. Tom?
Isn't there a Portage handbook?
Oh, I missed it. I got something off track. Yes, Tom, do you have any questions or comments about the Portage handbook?
For students participate in sports, they have to be in school all day, right? And
Correct.
if they are, if their alarm malfunctions and they're 10 minutes late, does that mean they can't participate? Or how strict is that?
In the Portage Handbook?
Well, actually, it's in the coaches, but you know, when you're doing Portage, I don't know what the requirements are as far as like attendance. Do they have to be there at 8 o'clock to sign in? Or if they're being online, do they, you know, they may not have a reason to sign in that day just because of the assignment or something, or are they always required to sign in for classes? And the question is that to what standards are they held versus people who are in person as far as participating in activities?
Okay, so let's take a look at page 8. And so that goes and shows that in order to practice, they must be in attendance that day. And so I think the key thing there is that we're going to look at the so the Portage attendance is a little bit different, Tom. So I'm just trying to look here for the spot where you're right, the students do need to be in school to participate. There's a different approach with Portage in terms of the number of when they are in school. You have to attend a certain number of days per week as opposed to Monday through Friday. So I don't have a good answer for you on that right now. I will bring something to the next meeting, Tom, to be able to make sure that I clarify that for you.
Great, thank you.
Other questions about the Portage handbook? Okay, now I think we can move on. So moving on to the superintendent's operation and COVID-19 update. Dr. Hillman.
Yes, so this is the last report of this particular school year. And so today we are highlighting some comparison in terms of COVID-19 cases from a year ago to now. And then we've got a number of other items that we're going to share here tonight. I do want to start talking about something that we haven't had to talk about substantially really over the last couple of months in terms of its impact, as much as we had talked about it before, I should say. But when we look at this, we go back, I want to just go back to August of last year. And I'm really happy that Cheryl Hall is here in the audience tonight, who's been our COVID-19 coordinator. You know, if we go back to August of last year, when we started to have to pivot, right? Because I think up until early August, we thought life is back to regular. And then, of course, we had the Delta variant that changed the trajectory of the pandemic yet again. And this board made some very difficult decisions, but was resolute in its goal, which was to prioritize uninterrupted in-person learning. And when you made that our goal, That goal was a collective goal. We were talking about operating school every day in person. And I'm happy to report to you that we completed the school year and we operated every single day collectively in person, with the exception of one snow day. And I'm very pleased that I only had to drive the roads once this year in the early morning. And I think I'm owed several more years of that after this, but that's another conversation for another time. So I think that we also want to acknowledge, while that was the collective goal, we do also acknowledge that there was not complete uninterrupted in-person learning for individuals. So for some of our staff members, for either their own selves or for their families that caused them to miss work to be attending to their family. For a student who may have been exposed or was considered a close contact, I don't want to paint it that, we achieved the collective goal, but I think it's important to acknowledge and name that many students in the district did not have completely uninterrupted in-person learning. And we do know that that was very difficult for a lot of students and families, especially if a student was impacted more than one time. People want their kids to be back in school doing the kinds of things that kids do. So while we achieved that collective goal, I just can't say it without saying we do know that people were impacted and families were impacted individually. I think we need to take a look at the numbers. And I gave you those numbers in the packet. So in 2020-21, when I gave you the report at the end of last year, roughly the same time, the same timing board meeting, we had finished our first full year of pandemic-related education, or pandemic-impacted education. And we had a total of 263 cases through the entire school year in 2020-21. And a year ago, when I spoke with you, we all acknowledged that it was probably the most difficult school year of our careers. And we hadn't seen anything yet. So this year, you take a look, and through 2021-22, we had 1,415 cases that were reported in staff and students through the school year. And point out that with over 600 cases alone in January, not going to say it quite triple, but certainly 2.5 times more cases in January than the entire 2020-21 school year. We know that as the virus has continued to adapt and to mutate, that we do see it representing more and more like a mild to moderate a traditional mild to moderate respiratory illness. So the kinds of case reporting that we were getting later in the year was very different than the kinds of cases, that we were responding to in the 2020-21 school year. But I do think that for a variety of different reasons, the 21-22 school year was far more challenging than the 2020-21 school year for many reasons, and some of which I look at and some of which we won't. But it was challenging, and we are very hopeful that we have gotten to an inflection point where we understand we have far more tools now than we did at the beginning of the school year for people to choose to use to be able to mitigate their own potential exposure. And as we move forward, we are hoping that we are moving forward like we might thought of last year, that we're going to have less and less pandemic implications. We did many of our traditional things in person. We held choir concerts, we had football games, we had rock and roll revival, we had a fall musical. Think of a graduation outside. Think of all the things that we were able to do this. It certainly was different. There were times where it was different, but we did accomplish those things. And I think that is a reason to say, okay, we really had some reasonable success there. We did provide parents through the dashboard detailed data. I'm happy to say that I am no longer updating the COVID-19 dashboard every morning. That's quite a relief. We also provide, so every day we updated the COVID-19 dashboard, and every weekend we updated the weekly influenza-like illness rate. We started that midway through the year, or I think it was actually at the beginning of the school year we started that. And then we also had 30 parent updates through district level email. So we provided 30 updates through the year. We offered multitude of COVID-19 testing solutions. That's something that really changed during the school year from the beginning to the end. So we've already talked about the 1,854 COVID-19 tests that were provided at the district office between November 1st and June 7th of 2022. And we provided thousands of additional rapid antigen test kits for families beginning in December of 2021. The first real big push, if you remember, was during the winter break when we allowed people to come pick up those tests at the district office, and we gave out over 1,000 of them that week alone. So we really became the testing center for the community in many, many ways. And I cannot adequately express the gratitude that we should all have for our school nurses and our school health staff. We were able to provide again this year a health aide at each building just to help manage the health office. But our school nurses just did amazing work at the district level, at the building level, helping us think through how do we adjust and react. So for people who are watching and people who are here, please make sure that you take a moment and thank our school nursing staff for all of the work that they did to help families navigate this very difficult time. And so we're very proud of that. We did also pledge to regularly review data, which you did at every board meeting. At every board meeting, I provided you an update with what the latest data was, both within the school district and from the county. And we did say that we would make changes based upon the latest scientific analysis of the virus and what the local public health situation was. And so as difficult as January was with so many different cases, we saw how rapidly it was also declining, and we were able to reduce those mitigation strategies in February of 2022. And we were able to eliminate a lot of things at that point, including required masking. And so while we know that the virus is not completely going to subside, we do think it's at a point right now where we can manage it differently than we've had to in the past for a variety of different reasons and a number of tools for people to be able to make some of their own individual decisions. And so at the end of the day, I want to say I am genuinely grateful to the community for both your support and for your criticism. That sounds a little like criticism. We like criticism. We like getting feedback. It wasn't always easy to hear. We won't lie about that. We know that there was a range of emotion when it came to providing feedback about this, but I am truly grateful for all of the feedback, and all of it was seriously considered, and all of it was taken to heart. And from the place where people providing that feedback were doing so in what they felt was the best thing for kids from their perspective. And our job as a school board, your job as a school board, mine as a superintendent, is to take all that feedback, use the public health data, use the recommendations we have from experts, and try to put together a program that would allow us to prioritize uninterrupted in-person learning. So we certainly know that system decisions about how we try to prevent spread, the protocols for those who tested positive for the virus, the protocols for those who were considered close contacts, were met with appreciation by many, and really derided and angered a number of others. And that's what we have to just name that. We just have to say that that was the range of emotions that our community had. And we live in a democratic society where we expect a range of opinions. That's part of being in a democracy. And so I ask, as we move forward into managing this differently, I ask that we all come to a point of collective forgiveness for each other. No matter what your perspective was, we know that people had frustrations with lots of other things, right? And so we are at a point where I think everybody was coming from their best perspective. But as we move forward, it is time to have some collective community forgiveness and move forward. It's not that people will forget. We can't ask people to forget, but we can ask people to forgive. And regardless of how you felt about it, whether you were in favor of the decisions that were made, whether you were against the decisions that were made, we ask that we move forward in that spirit of forgiveness and cooperation, those things that have made Northfield such a special place and a great place for kids. And so I humbly ask that. Time will help us. We'll better understand, and we'll better apply the lessons that we learned during this crucible phase of our lives. Time will help us heal as a community, but it's also going to take all of us to have the humility and the vulnerability to say, you know what, this was, the word historic is overused. I understand that, but this was truly historic. And it is a part of our lives and our history that we hope to never have to go through significantly again. And we're not completely done with it. No one's declaring victory, over this yet. But we do need to keep moving forward together as a community. So I humbly ask people to just think about that. I ask them to think about that we completed the school year on a very positive note, and I'm hopeful that I don't have to give these kinds of reports moving forward. But I truly and genuinely thank everyone who took the time to give us feedback, to provide their perspective. And I thank the board for making very difficult decisions that we knew were going to be met with satisfaction by some and not appreciated by others. That's what governance organizations have to do. And so it's time to move forward in the best way that we can. So I thank the entire community for their support in whatever way you gave it. And we are all hopeful that we're moving into a different phase where we can handle and manage this differently than what we have over the last 2 years. So I'm going to stop there for a moment and just ask if board members have any questions about what we are hoping to be one of the last COVID-19 reports.
Questions, board members? Julie?
Well, you answered my question because I was wondering for the 2022-23 school year, if you envision keeping a dashboard, doing a specific, okay.
Yeah, I think we will, of course, had you asked me that question last June, I might have said the same thing. But I do think that we plan to retire the dashboard as is. I do think that weekly influenza-like illness report is a healthy piece of data for us to share regardless, because it talks about all of the kinds of those kinds of respiratory illnesses that we see in our community. And so we do anticipate continuing to update that part weekly in terms of the building level influenza-like illness rate. We think that's just a good piece of data to share. I do not see at this point us sharing the level of detail around cases. I do see it going back to more of if there's a case of influenza in an elementary classroom, that kind of notification will be made, just COVID, just like influenza or something else. We don't do that at the middle and the high school, and I anticipate that is the way that will go as well, that we won't make those kinds of individual notifications. And then, of course, we'll follow the state piece around if there's a 5% influenza-like illness rate over the course of a week, we would take a little bit deeper look at the data.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I have a question for you. So with the 1,854 Q tests, do you know how many tested positive?
We actually do. I don't have that data here with me, though. Anita might be able to pull it up while we're talking. But I don't have that data right here as part of the report.
Okay. Well, she's looking for it. So we should not expect to see a COVID update in July.
Correct.
This is a
We'll
great
continue to
milestone.
provide an operations update because I think that there's some of those things about showing the bright spots aligned with our strategic plan and giving you those kinds of reports. So we'll continue with an operations update, but we will remove COVID from it unless there's a reason to include it.
That's a very hopeful sign. That's great. Thank you for how you've been on top of all things COVID the last 2 years and how you have been such a strong leader to get us through this global pandemic in, I think, very good fashion. We all read about other school districts who've had it much, much worse in many different ways. And I think we have done about as best as we possibly could. So,
And we need to thank Cheryl Hall, who was the COVID coordinator and took all the difficult calls. So good work, Cheryl. Thank you.
good work, Cheryl. Do you have a number for us, Anita? Okay. That's okay. I was just curious. It's not that important. All right. So moving on to the rest of your,
Yes,
Operations
so
update.
very excited to tell you that we have a very innovative program or an innovative program coming to Northfield Middle School. The program is called Athletes Committed to Educating Students. And it is an outstanding out-of-school time program that has been successful in the Twin Cities. And we are going to be their first pilot expansion program that's going to be in partnership with the Northfield Healthy Community Initiative. So really that there's this after school program that we're still learning and learning how it will be implemented here in Northfield. But it is an evidence-based program that shows that they're provided academic and social emotional skill development opportunities. the place that has had this program has seen students improve their test scores, increase school attendance, better relationships with peers and mentors. It's a time for young learners who need more support to be able to get that in an after-school program. So we're very proud to be partnering with HCI to be able to offer this. There was a site visit. There were several communities that were being considered for the pilot expansion. We were selected. And as you know, one of our strategic commitments is to partnerships, and partnerships specifically that help us accelerate progress toward our student achievement benchmarks. And our team is very excited about this opportunity for taking this evidence-based program from the Twin Cities and implementing it as an after-school program at Northfield Middle School. More information to come, but I just want to make you aware that we were selected, and I believe that press release went out today. Also, just want to share in the update, I shared a few photos of our graduations, and we did successfully hold 2 graduation ceremonies, for the first at the Area Learning Center on June 1st and at Northfield High School on June 5th. And we did get the weather to cooperate on June 5th. I think we were all a little nervous as we kept watching the way that the forecast changed, but it turned out to be cool and some wind, but not as much as we've had in other years. And not, I think there might have been a few sprinkles, but nothing significant. And so we thank the high school and we thank the team for their work to get those graduation ceremonies completed. And we wish our new alumni the best as they move into their bright futures. So those are 2 bright spots. And then just a part that I did want to share, because I know it's on people's minds, and I just want to share what we do from a perspective of approaching school safety and preventing violence. I know that whenever we see a tragedy like happened in Uvalde, Texas, we immediately think about our own schools. We immediately think about our own children. Our hearts go out to that community. Just the incredible tragedy and the grief that accompanies that, both at that local level and then as that cascades across the country, as people just think about their own children and their own local school. So we all care deeply about children, and we want them to be both physically and emotionally safe. And so I thought I would just share a few thoughts that we have shared with parents about school safety and what we think the tenets are here in Northfield. And so I would say that there's really a couple of different pieces that we would look at. First is school safety begins and ends with relationships. The relationships that we have with students are the first line and the most important component of prevention. What we know is that if kids trust adults in their community, someone other than just their parents, right? They will tell us if they are worried about a friend or if something is concerning to them. I've done this for more than 25 years now. And I will tell you that if there are trusting relationships, students almost always, and I use that because I can't account for every circumstance, but almost always will tell a trusted adult. And we know this because we hear things from kids, and almost always it is something that is either intervened with or there wasn't any kind of real concern, but it's the see something, say something. And in our community, we even have anonymous ways that people can report through the TIP 411 program that the city has. So that relationship component is so important. It's why we want to make sure that kids feel valued, that we are greeting them by name at the school door, that they know that people in the school care about them, because if they feel that, they will tell someone. And so it's very important with that. When we also think about prevention, we've done a lot of work around curriculum and coaching of students. So you are all aware of the formal social emotional learning instruction that happens in pre-K through 8th grade. That's the second step curriculum. That's part of the base, the general education class, and pre-kindergarten through 5th grade. And then it's embedded in the health class in 6th through 8th grade. You are all aware of the program that we have at Northfield High School that's called Students Supporting Students. There are around 30 student leaders who are selected by their peers each year to receive advanced training from Hazelden. And what happens is those students learn how to help make sure that their peers, when they're talking with them, that they can listen and they can direct them to the appropriate resources that are necessary should someone have a mental health issue or a chemical health issue, that they can help connect a student to the right adult who can assist them. The importance is that these are students who get the Student Supporting Students program training. They are students who other kids tell us, these are the kids we go to when we want to talk with our peers about an issue. 10th graders are trained in teen mental health first aid. That training helps students identify and how to respond to friends and peers who are demonstrating signs of mental health challenges. Doesn't mean that they know how to do it. It just means that they know the signs to look for and gives them some tips. Maybe not the depth of the student supporting students curriculum, but it helps them have awareness, which can be very helpful because kids care about their friends, right? And if they are armed with additional tools, they will know what to do. And I can tell you, we've heard across the country this year that teenage mental health is in crisis. We knew about it before the pandemic. It's just been exacerbated as we've moved forward. And I will tell you that we have heard from more kids about concerns for their friends and how important that is that they are willing to step up and help them, because then we can connect them to the services if we know about it. And so that's an important part with the mental health first aid in 10th grade. We also use the National Association of School Psychologists Prepare program, and that's with our building crisis teams. Again, to help look at setting systems to prevent issues and then also how to respond both in the moment and then afterwards. So that prepare curriculum is something we use with adults. At each of our elementary schools, as you well know, as we went through the budget prioritization process, mental health was prioritized by all parties. And so at our elementary schools, we employ a licensed school social worker, we have a school psychologist, and we have at least one behavior coach at each elementary school. At the middle and high school, we employ a licensed school social worker, a school psychologist, several school counselors at our secondary schools. And as you know, we added the additional counselors at our 3 secondary schools this year. And those will continue moving forward because they were prioritized by the community. Another important part of prevention is staff completing the required anti-bullying training. And so that's something that all staff completed again last year, and that's on an annual basis. Each school does have a threat assessment team that is able to come together to process and to review any concerning student situations and intervene as appropriate. We have a comprehensive district crisis plan that Director of Buildings and Grounds Cole Nelson coordinates, and that is reviewed annually. We do conduct the 5 state required lockdown drills. In addition, an important part of prevention is having a strong relationship with local law enforcement. And you know that we have a very strong relationship with the Northfield Police Department, and our current school resource officer has had a career in social work prior to becoming a police officer. So we have that connection as well. So we talk about relationships, making sure kids know that people care and that they feel comfortable going to them. We talk about prevention. I've just listed quite a few things that we are doing. That doesn't mean that we think that we have it solved. We do not. But what we share that is that we are doing a lot of really good things, and we're always on the lookout for are there programs that can continue to help us prevent these kinds of tragedies and be able to intervene early. And then finally, we do need to consider some of the physical safety things that we can do in our school buildings. And so every K-12 school, as you're all aware, has a secure front entrance. And that people need to be buzzed into the office and or the building once the school day starts. It's a little bit different. We've got a couple of different approaches. One where you enter the office right away and then the office staff have to buzz you in through the door into the building. Some where you come into an area where you check in through a service window and then are buzzed into the building. But visitors, once the school day start, have to make a connection with someone in the office before they're able to get into the school. I think a very important part that sometimes may not be understood effectively is that each classroom door in the district is able to be locked from the inside without a key. So there's a thumb lock that we can just turn. If it's one that has a panic bar, you press the panic bar and you're able to turn. You don't need to find your keys. You don't need to have to go into the hallway to be able to turn and lock the door from the outside. And if you think about it, if you're really in a crisis moment, I challenge people to think if you're really crisis moment, I want to ask every adult here and watching, how many people would be able to effectively find their key, get it, and be able to do that in a short amount of time. I think many people can, but think about the stress in that moment of having to do that fine motor skill of being able to lock a door from the outside, and think of how much simpler it is to be able to do it from the inside. And I know I've gotten a little bit of feedback over the years about, well, that's not real security. I'm telling you, that is real security. And that is a small convenience that can make a significant difference in a moment of crisis. And so we did that over several years, and all of our doors are able to do that at this point. Every building has a lockdown button that's in the main office that automatically locks all of the entrances around the building and also alerts 911. And we do have a button in the district office that can do that same thing for the entire school district. So we share those pieces. We've also, when we built the new Greenvale Park building, we worked extensively with law enforcement around how high should the brick be so somebody couldn't drive a car through it. What kind of, they don't actually recommend bulletproof glass. They recommend resistance, right? In terms of film that can catch, if a window breaks. So I share those to say that we deeply considered those kinds of physical safety aspects when we did our 2018 bond projects, and Wold was instrumental in helping us understand what the latest in the technology was, so we could have those pieces of physical security without and still maintaining a welcoming learning environment. And my final comment on this, and I am taking some time with this because this is important, right? And we don't talk about it all the time. And I know people are interested in thinking about it right now because, of course, what we are seeing in the news. At the end of the day, we have an incredibly difficult balancing act. We are totally committed to physical and emotional safety of students. We have to balance with the physical aspects of that about making sure that the learning environment still feels welcomed, right? We can make a learning environment incredibly secure from a physical standpoint, and it would no longer feel like a place of learning. None of us want that either, right? So we take these very intentional actions, we take these very intentional and thoughtful physical improvements that provide real security from a physical sense, while also making sure that we maintain the support of a quality learning environment. And so it comes back to relationships matter more than anything else. And we have gotten away a little bit from people really taking an interest in their friends and neighbors. And I think that we need to continue to look at this, the old adage, and it is cliche, but it is true that it takes a village and that everyone needs to care about these things. And if you think you hear something, say something. We would every single time prefer to look into something that wasn't there than miss something. And so it's that relationship part. If we can have quality relationships with kids, they will tell us when someone's in crisis. We have to have preventative measures like intentionally teaching the curriculum and the other training that I've shared with you tonight. And then finally, that physical security has an important place. It has to be done in a very thoughtful way, which I do believe that Northfield Public Schools has done until this point. So those are the rest of my report for this evening in terms of the ACES program coming to Northfield. More information to come on that. I was just happy to share with you that we were selected about graduations and just some reflections on Uvalde. So I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Dr. Hillman. While Claudia gets settled in, welcome, Claudia. I will ask if anyone has any questions for Dr. Hillman. Julie?
Well, I always appreciate the superintendent update, and I really appreciate you walking through the response or the messaging you gave parents following Uvalde. And I really appreciate the timeliness of that communication to parents. I'm sure it was really, everyone was gravitating towards news and thinking about how, obviously as parents, how they would be feeling, but also about their own personal, school and district situation. And so I think it was really meaningful for parents to get that message. And I appreciate how quickly and timely you put that out. So thank you.
Other comments, questions? Are you ready to be handed the gavel? All right.
Okay, so we will move on to Director Murderstoff and Sal Bagley of Wold Architects, providing us an overview of the Northfield High School Facility Task Force. There's a report, and they will also summarize the work session from this evening. Welcome, Val and Sal.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to let Sal do most of the work today.
Yeah, we're just going to provide just for people watching, we did have a board work session from 4 p.m. to around 5:50, where we really did dive into the report from Wold Architects and Engineers and Knudsen Construction about the Northfield High School Facilities Task Force. But Sal, if you would just give a very big picture overview of the task force, and then we can ask if there's any further dialogue at this time.
Maybe I might just leave up the task force member names while I do that. So, earlier today, we did go through the deeper presentation from the task force. And so we'd come to the board in February to approve a charge statement or a mission statement for that task force to put together a master plan for the high school, asking them to take into account financial feasibility and enrollment and programming over the next 20 years. This is the task force participation or membership. So we had a great representation from staff, students, community members, coaches, people who work in the arts, administration, and their perspectives all really helped inform the recommendation. Wold and Knutson both facilitated the task force, who met for over the course of 4 meetings in March and April. So we had 2 meetings in March, 2 meetings in April. As a big picture, we had the first 2 meetings really for more educational in nature for the task force. So they learned about the capacity of the building. They learned about the district's enrollment projections over the next 10 years. We talked a lot about the condition of the facility. And then we spent a lot of time going through input that had been gathered from a variety of groups. So we had listening sessions with many of the departments of the district office. There were a lot of opportunities for staff to give input, both at a staff meeting, a department head meeting, and a couple of just times where they could come and stop by and talk to us. We did get student input during those stop by times, as well as a district youth council listening session, and then listening sessions from music, drama, activities and athletics, and community education. And so the first 2 meetings for the task force were really taking in all of that information. They were also given the opportunity to take a tour through the facility. And so for those who were interested, could arrive an hour early before meeting 2 and got to really come see a lot of the building. See its various vintages and the things that work well and don't work well in the flesh. Then meeting 3, we spent a lot of time creating writing some need statements and creating a rubric for really what the master plan should accomplish. So I did go through those earlier today, and then they had the better part of the meeting to actually brainstorm what they think should be done about it. So they were provided a lot of information about the building, a map of the building, and some tools like pens and Post-it notes and colored dots to try to help convey to the rest of the group where they think investment was needed and at what level. So they spent most of meeting 3 doing that. And there was a lot of overlap between the groups. We did small group work for that day. A few groups made multiple master plan options, but many of the common themes were major investments needed in the locker room area, in the music area, the science facts, and the V-wing, or the kind of the tech ed part of the building. There was a major focus on addressing the maintenance needs that the building has, and then expansion of additional activities space and a 3rd music performance space. I would say all groups had some addressing of that in their master plan. Certainly they varied in, some groups had major aspirational ideas like tearing a part of the building down and building it up, at 2 or 3 stories. Or filling in the courtyards entirely. But I think once they saw some of the cost estimates for some of the work, many of them were able to backpedal and realize why they were doing that was to try to create a more flexible building, which is possible through renovation. And so after meeting 3, Wold and Knutson worked together to cost estimate all of the master plans that the groups had come up with and break it into a series of themes, which I can fast forward to. A series of themes where we asked them to prioritize or rank those needs. Let me put it in presentation mode. So the better part of meeting 4 was about ratifying the recommended components of the master plan and prioritizing them. So in small groups, they did rank the needs from a 1, which would be a top priority, all the way down to a 10, which would be not a priority. There's even a couple examples of things that aren't even on this list because every group called it a 10. One group had brainstormed, maybe instead of fixing the auditorium, we should just build a new one. But fixing the one we have was about 2 million and building a new one was about 10 million. And with that information, no group recommended that that was the right way to solve your needs for the auditorium, for example. So you can see on here the major themes. Obviously, I said maintenance was a big topic in the task force. Making sure that some of your specialized environments were designed to meet the needs of today and into the future. So science facts and the V-wing is what many people would call it, the T&E area. The locker rooms and making sure that the kitchen cafeteria arrangement is both efficient and comfortable for students. spent a little bit of time talking about how there has been a change in the building code, and if you expand the facility at all, you will be required to have one part of the building hardened for a storm shelter. Flexibility was a major theme throughout the task force and the listening sessions with staff and students, and improving building flexibility was a priority. And there is like I said, a variety of solutions studied for how to accomplish that. One of them would be flexible furniture throughout the building. Another would be creating additional flexible spaces like what you have in the S wing and the V wing. And that rated pretty highly on the task force as a priority. The auditorium updates I've already talked about. When it comes to the music needs, there were really two ways to accomplish that. The major challenge is the lack of a third rehearsal space. A couple groups brainstormed about moving all of the music down to the same level as the auditorium and reusing the upper space where music is today for classrooms for health and a black box. And then a few groups brainstormed sort of the opposite of adding a black box and a third music space and then renovating music in place. And so the figure being carried here today is the higher of the two figures. But groups, like I said, there was just really two ways to accomplish the same need that were brainstormed. One of the only items that had some differing opinions among the task force was the adding of artificial turf. So you can see a couple of groups had it as a higher priority. One group had it as a 4, and they explained if the building's going to get bigger and take up green space, having highly usable green space was a priority to us. So it was kind of tied to if you added any gyms. Whereas a couple groups, you can see that they ranked it a 10 and did not see that as a high priority. And then the only major building expansion that the group agreed upon was the need for more PE space, which was heard loud and clear in our student, staff, and our activities listening sessions. What we were asked to price was a 4-station field house. So that would be 4 basketball courts. Certainly you could divide it as in a variety of ways, but that's how you get to that $18 million figure. Certainly if you did fewer courts, it would be less, and more courts would be more. But all told, all of these master plan components that address the needs and check all the boxes on the rubric come to about 87 million. And then to really recap the ending of the task force, they were asked to study or pursue a variety of renovation options. They were presented the tax impact for 3 tiers, so 40 million, 55 and 70. And I think those were picked as just example tiers. And then obviously all the master plan priorities would be 87 million. We were asked as a part of the task force process to work with Knutson to estimate a replacement facility. And while it would vary by the exact site and if utilities and road infrastructure was available, after looking at the last about 8 new high schools built in the state and our inflation recommendations, that would be a range of 118 to 120 million. So the goal of the task force work would be to provide you all with, some choices. So you have the task force work of identifying the needs and the prioritization of those needs, and having options for how to address the needs that can be really can guide investment based on your tax impact tolerance from your community. I will say that these figures are relevant for 2022 election and 2023 bidding. If you were to choose to take this up at some future date or over time, you would want to make sure to adjust your pricing for construction inflation, which I know is on many people's minds. The only eligible election date left in this year is November. There is an election date in August, but you would have had to make your decisions already, which was part of the plan. And there are 5 election dates in most years in Minnesota. So they are in February, April, May, August, and November. We worked with Ellers, your municipal advisor, to create a variety of tax impact scenarios. So on the left-hand side here, you can see 120 million, or that replacement facility. And the 2 columns really just reflect 2 financing scenarios of 20 or 25 million. And then the right-hand side shows those tiers of pricing that were presented to the task force, ranging from 40 up to 70, and then also an option at 110. And let me know if you want me to go through any more. I'm trying to condense from 8 hours down to 40 minutes down to 5 minutes. We mostly just wanted to thank the task force for all their work. They put a lot of effort in 2-hour meetings that often went a little long. Some people took tours. And many of them often thought about it between meetings because we would start every meeting with thoughts since last meeting. And they always had interesting and poignant things to discuss that took up a little bit of time. So.
So one of the things we discussed in our earlier work session was possibly partnering with the city to
Yes.
do some sort of ice facility. Is that something that could be combined with the field house? Does it make any sense to do that? Or is that so different in nature that it would have to be two different facilities?
I don't think there's any reason why they couldn't be combined. I think the major consideration would be if your site is well suited for the loss of green space and if parking demand would exceed available parking. That would be a good question to discuss with the city on if they would. And if you could use, sometimes you can use the same parking, so to speak, because the hours are different enough. But a major assembly space like a ice arena often comes with pretty high parking demand. So that would just be something to think about, but no reason why you couldn't.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Tom?
Will this report be available online?
The report is available online, so we post the agenda and any information for work sessions online as well, so people they can get the report right now, northfieldschools.org, and then you go to the school board page, you can get the packet right from there.
Julie?
I just want to thank everyone who was involved, Sal and Knutson, for, the amazing work you have done for us and the work that you did on this particular project, and Dr. Hillman for assembling the task force that was really broad base of stakeholders, and to Tom and Jeff for participating and being the school board liaison. This report has really exceeded my expectation in terms of the levels that we would get to in terms of the decision that will be before us, whether we move forward or how the board decides to proceed. But it's just an excellent report. I really appreciate the work of the task force. This was a tough task force to be on in terms of time commitment and level of decisions that they were being asked to make and weigh in on. And I think that the work that was done is just really excellent, and the process could not have been better. And I think it is a huge decision for the board that we will work on over the course of the next few weeks, months, whatever it takes. But it has really exceeded my expectations in terms of identifying where we're at and where we could go. And I lastly appreciate everyone's commitment to stewardship. And the task force identified right away the challenges, and really they understood it. They understood the ask of the community and balance that against what they know will serve students and bring us into the future. So I just thank you for the work that you did. It was outstanding.
And we
Thank
just want to
you.
recognize Val Murdersdorf and Cole Nelson, who
Yes.
really had a lot of heavy lifting in this process. And then, of course, high school administration, who helped us with every couple of weeks, we'd have an oversight committee just to help keep the process moving. So but Val Murdersdorf and Cole really did a lot of heavy lifting in this process to this point.
Yeah, thank you. I usually try to remember you guys, but I forgot tonight. So thanks.
Nice, thank you. Anybody else have a question or comment? No, you have one?
Yes, thank you so much. You articulated the work of the task force very well. And
Thank
I
you.
think the task force identified the needs and the expectations of the community very well. And thank you for summarizing it for us.
Thank you. I think I made a joke at meeting 3, maybe it was meeting 4, that it was hard to know at the beginning if everyone was going to be on the same page or not, or how much work we would have to do to come to consensus. But there was a lot of consensus around the needs. The only differences were really about how exactly to go about addressing those needs, which obviously has a huge financial impact. But there was almost no time needed to be spent on, is that a need or not a need? There was a lot of agreement on that.
Any other comments or questions? I want to thank you too. Well said, Julie. Thanks for all of your effort and work. I have an easy question for you, just regarding the groups, how they were chosen. And were they kind of balanced in terms of representation from students to administrators? And then also, did they come back and report to each other, or did their individual sessions just get sent
Sure,
over to you?
sure. So we spent all of meeting 1 and 2 in large group format. Actually, no, the end of meeting 2, we did some small group work for creating the rubric. And what we asked people to do was to go work with people that they both did not know and to try to help balance some of the perspectives. And so the example was, if there's already another teacher at that table, please go to the next table. If there's already another board member at that table, please go to the next table. And to try to make sure the groups had some variety. And then group 1 from meeting 1, 2, and 3 was always different. So there was some mixing up of the group, and they did report out to each other. So at the end of meeting 3, for example, when there's no more presentation up. They presented to each other their ideas. And so actually we did not present those ideas here. Let me bring it up right here. So when they were brainstorming what should be done with the facility, they were given these worksheets and they worked in small groups. And the last about 20 or so minutes of the meeting was each group presenting out to the rest of the groups. And then similar for the prioritization exercise. So each group went through their rationale for why they felt something was a 1 or a 2 or a 3. Yeah.
And there were 36 members on the task force. We did identify, Val and I worked to identify specific stakeholder groups. So we looked for teachers in general education areas, teachers in special education, teachers in specific areas that need some specialized equipment. We looked for parents with children in the district. We looked for community members who don't have children in the district. And then, of course, tried to make sure that it was as diverse of a group as we reasonably could pull together.
Thank you. Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And just the next steps. The next steps that we'll be bringing back this topic here at future board meetings, and we potentially will have another work session around this. Just as we start to formulate how we use this report to create a master plan for moving forward.
Great. Thank you. Great presentation.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Good evening.
Right. We will hear now from Cheryl Hall, Director of Special Services. We have a request to hire an additional non-licensed special education staff member. Welcome, Cheryl.
Thank you. Good evening. I think there was an earlier question about COVID-19 numbers and the number of positives. I don't know if this is the number you're looking for, but for this past school year, there were 1,415 COVID cases.
I was wondering about the number of positive of the tests that were done.
Oh,
of our tests.
in
of
our
the
tests. Okay,
1854,
sorry.
The Q tests.
Misunderstood. Thank you. All right. So to my request, do you have it?
Yeah, Anita has.
I do have it. The number is 300. So that's a 16% positivity rate.
Thank you.
Sorry to interrupt with that. All right. Well, thank you for the opportunity to make this request for special education. As you know, with the budget process, we made a commitment to try to control the costs in special education as best as we can, with still meeting the needs of our students. With that, we always in early childhood have some unknowns. Actually, in special education or education as a whole, sometimes we have those unknowns, and we do have at the end of the year a request for some additional supports for some of our early learning students that are identified with special needs. This cost is with salary and benefits, about $31,000. Approximately 55% of the salary is reimbursed for a total net cost of $22,600. As you know, we try to, as I said, we try to make sure that we are being transparent with our information, and we're also trying to make sure that we are being very very cautious with any additions. And so from additional information, we've had 138 students birth to 5 in our Northfield Community Education Center that are served in special education. Approximately 40 of those students will be going on to K, but we'll have about 90 to 100 students birth to 5 in our program starting in the fall. We do about 100 evaluations, and that was our number this past year of students birth to 5. And we identify probably close to 40 to 50 students in that population. So that's what the numbers that we will be supporting. If we look at comparisons of adding staff and looking at that, we do average about 11, 12 educational assistants in that program across the programs. And with this addition, we had estimated that we would need 11 educational assistants for next year. And this is one additional, which brings us about to that average. So if we look at from year to year, we're not increasing the cost of the numbers for that level of programming, really. Any questions?
Thank you. Questions, comments? Amy?
Thanks, Cheryl. You know, I always support the special education program. I am curious, how many students would this person be interacting with?
Well, we have, there's a number of children. So there's one, actually, this would be split into 2 different positions. In the morning, they would be supporting approximately 6 to 8 students. And in the afternoon, it would be more of a one-to-one kind of a child specific and helping with others as they can.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Comments, questions? Julie?
So the question always has to be, you know, you're concerned about finding someone that will, you know, the educational assistant, we know that's a difficult position to fill. The next time we are together is July 13th. And I'm just wondering from a position of being able to post this position and hire this person, if that date of July 11th, when we would approve it, is going to be problematic in your view?
I don't see that as really problematic. I mean, Julie, I always appreciate the board's question about that and and how they have expedited. You've all expedited that many times. And so we do appreciate that. It does, of course, always, and, you know, will help out a little bit, but I don't see it being a big issue if you decide to wait.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, thank you, Cheryl.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to move on to item 6, the consent agenda. We will now move on to the approval of the consent grouping. As a reminder, there were some personnel items in the table file added to the consent grouping. If there's anything anyone would like to pull for the consent grouping, is there anything anyone would like to pull for separate consideration? Okay, is there a motion to approve the consent grouping? Moved by Amy, second. Second by Tom. All those in favor of approving the consent grouping, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, we're on to items for individual action, and we have several items, 7 it looks like, to take action on tonight. First, we have policy committee recommendations. I'll take a motion and then we can discuss. Is there a motion to approve the Early Ventures Elementary Parent Co-Curricular and Portage Elementary handbooks for the school year 2022-2023? Moved by Julie, second by Amy. Okay, Dr. Hellman, do you want to make any comments ahead of the discussion?
There was one question earlier that I want to answer that I've got the answer for, was around in the Early Ventures handbook around pets. And what that is really intended to do, it's around when there are some farm animals that are brought, and that's usually outside the school. And then it also references therapy or reading dogs. That's what that's intended to handle.
That's what I assumed, and I apologize because it wasn't a new addition. It's something that's probably been in the handbook for a while, but I just noticed it, so wanted to ask about it. So thank you.
Can I add to that? Because I also checked on it.
Okay.
It is a DHS requirement that we have that rule as well. And the only pet that we've had is one fish. So.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other comments or questions on these handbooks? I had a question about medication when it comes to allergies. If they're over the counter, if they'll be stored at the school. 'Cause it seemed like they're not giving out any more over the counter medications, like they're not giving away aspirin when needed.
So you're talking about the elementary handbook,
The early ventures.
the early ventures handbook. Okay, let me take a look. Which page is that? Should be at the bottom. Page 9. Let's take a look.
I was thinking maybe there should be a statement that talks about if you're bringing over the counter allergy medication, it should follow the rules under medication. Just to clear that.
Page 9. Trying to find it here. Oh, here we go. Pages 7 and 8. Yep, okay.
So they talk about, yeah, they talk about allergies. I'm sorry.
And we're talking early ventures handbook here, correct? Oh, and sick child. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Second paragraph. Okay.
Just some, I think maybe some clarifying language around who's bringing these allergy medications. And I think there's even a statement about if an, did it say EpiPen is used? Just some, yeah, just, I was thinking just some clarifying. language.
So we're not you're saying that there's not the part about allergy medication in that second paragraph of the sick child or absence, but it references, okay, yeah, I don't have an answer for you on that right now. We will have to take a look as to why that part is different. What I would, request is that if that is something that board members are comfortable with us making an adjustment, we could bring it back to you, for an update if needed.
And then I had one more in that same handbook, page 16. And it talks about, well, it uses the word charges. And I'm wondering, if it's referring to fines and fees. It's in
And
the behavior section, and so I started to think like bringing charges up.
okay, and we're looking at which portion?
Yeah. Bottom of page 16, under behavior incident reports, charges will be assessed. So they're referring to fines and fees.
I'm gonna have to look at that. I do think it is, I think it is around the payment structure for that, not clearly not criminal charges in the yearly
Yeah.
ventures handbook. So
Yeah.
Val looks like she has a,
No, I was just gonna concur with that because it refers to behavior leaves. And so
Mm.
oftentimes if there's an extended leave from daycare, parents are interested in not having to pay for it when their child is not attending. And so I think it's just being clear that if we are dismissing your child for behavior, that we're still gonna charge you for those days.
Okay. Okay. Good. Okay, any other comments or questions on any of the books? Okay, seeing no discussion, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion passes. Next, we have the revised 2021-2022 community education budget presented on May 23rd, 2022. Is there a motion to approve the revised community education budget as presented on May 23rd for 2021-2022? Okay, moved by Jeff, second by Tom. Any comments on that? We'll move on.
I don't think, Val, do you have any comments? I mean, Aaron gave the report at the last meeting and we give you one more meeting before we ask you to approve it.
So seeing no discussion, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion passes. Item C is the proposed 2022-23 budgets, all funds. I'll take a motion and then we can discuss. There's a summary under item C of items for individual action. Is there a motion to approve the proposed 2022-23 budgets as presented for all funds? Oh, moved by Julie, second by Corey. Okay, any comments on that? Counselor Hillman, Val?
I was just gonna say, you should each have a budget book at your spot. And so that's just the printed version. If you are not interested in the printed copy, feel free to bring it back to me. I reuse these. But there should be no material changes that I can think of between what was presented and what is included in the summary. But if you have further questions from any of the presentations or anything in the document, I am happy to answer them.
So seeing no further comments, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion passes. Next, we have the proposed 2023-2024 school year calendar. Is there a motion to approve the proposed 2023-24 school year calendar? Moved by Tom, second by Amy. Any comments?
I do want to point out, there is one item that just needs to be modified, and I thank board members for catching this. The description on this around the e-learning days talks about that on the third and subsequent full learning days, that we just missed that part in the updates. Of course, on the second and subsequent school closures due to weather, that we start the e-learning day procedure. So that is just a technical fix. I don't think we need to have an addendum to the motion, but we'll just make sure that we'll correct that before it's pushed out.
Thank you. Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Opposed? Okay, motion passes. Item D is co-curricular adds or reductions. I'll take a motion and then we can discuss. There's a motion to approve the addition of a 0.70 FTE girls head wrestling coach at a cost of $4,620 and the addition of a boys cross-country head coach and eliminating one assistant position. Okay, moved by Jeff, second by Tom. Thank you. Dr. Hillman, any comments?
But I just want to point out that this is a process that we have used with the co-curricular committee as a change in the NEA master agreement from several years ago. These two areas that we're looking at some modification are really around additional participation. So as we know, we did have a state champion girls wrestler this year. It is a fast growing sport. The feeling that we'll see additional young women participating in this sport this coming year prompts us to we'll have additional revenue as a result of that. And so we're looking at this modification to add someone specifically for head girls or girls head wrestling. And then cross country is a sport that continues to grow. And again, what they've used in the past is they've used a head coach for all of the runners and then an assistant coach. And they are looking at a boys and girls team with a head coach for each, and then demonstrating their stewardship, dropping the assistant coach. So they're really looking to shift it to a head coach and an assistant to a head coach for both boys and for girls.
Thank you. Any questions or comments, board members? Okay, seeing none, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Opposed? Okay, motion passes. Item F is the fiscal year 2022 audit engagement letter and HIPAA business associate agreement. Is there a motion to approve the fiscal year 2022 audit engagement letter and HIPAA business associate agreement from Clifton Larson Allen LLP in the amount of approximately $20,580 plus expenses and $3,150 per federal program audited? Okay, moved by Noel and second by moved by Corey, second by Noel. Thank you. Okay, Dr. Hillman, any comments?
I'll have Val talk just briefly. This is the start of the audit process.
It is. I put it on the schedule, which was a little hard to believe, but this is a standard. We do this annually. The fee structure did change slightly, just so that you're aware. They reduced the standard fee, but the single audit fee is now I think it was $31.50 per program. I've already expressed my displeasure with the new fee structure because it is going to adversely impact larger districts because we have more federal funding. And so I would say with the amount of federal funding that we have received, the odds are good that we will have 3 or 4 different federal programs tested this year, if not more, because we have multiple of them. So that was really disappointing to me. But I do understand with the volume of federal funding that they are also going to have more work. So it's not that I don't recognize the why. But I do think there's efficiencies gained when they're doing multiple. But I will digress. It's a standard agreement, the HIP agreements, the same language. And they have done a great job for the district. So that's really my only comments.
Thank you, Val. Okay, any questions or comments from the board? Okay, Amy.
So about how much does it cost for them to audit us? And do we ever consider having anybody else do the audit, or do we like going back to them because they know our procedures?
Yep. So there's definitely pros and cons to that. So I would say on average, it's been between 23 and 25,000 a year. And so they reduced that base fee to about 19 or somewhere in that range, 19 or 20, with the anticipation that they would do 1 or 2 federal programs, I think, to get it to the same cost. But the fact that it's a variable makes that an unknown at this point. So the way the single audit works is really based on the total expenditures that we have in the federal programs, which, as you're aware, we have approximately 21 different federal programs this year. They have to test a certain percentage of those dollars. And so if we have 2 really large programs that they can test that get that coverage, that's all they'll test because they just need to meet that percentage. But if we have a bunch of little ones where we had 10,000 here and 10,000 there, then they have to test multiple programs to meet that threshold. We do have a couple of large ones. And so I'm hopeful that it'll be relatively straightforward, but that's really an unknown until we get to that point in the audit. And so it's hard for me to say. And they have a whole bunch of other things that they look at in terms of risk assessment and things like that for testing. But to your second question, we certainly can go out for or solicit quotes for other vendors to do that work. There is a significant time savings, I would say, with the items that they already have on file. They have all of our contracts on file, all of our leases, all of our employment agreements, all of the kind of our internal control documents, all of that kind of behind the scenes stuff that doesn't really change a lot from year to year. And an incoming firm would have to learn all of that about us, right? Everything about how we do is new. And so there's an additional time commitment on the district's part to really bring them up to speed about the things that we do and why we do it. And every firm interprets things differently. So they could view something we're doing differently than CLA currently does, which means we could end up having to change things. But so there's pros and cons, but I would say typically you will get a quote that's lower, but that doesn't always mean as good a quality work or that they're doing the same things. They could just be trying to get their foot in the door. There's lots of different avenues. So I don't know if that fully answers your question, but
Corey.
Val, the single audit threshold, is it triggered only once for the district for funding? I think it's $750,000, or does it depend on the program? Like, we got millions of dollars. Does it count as one trigger, or is it depending where the money goes and be multiple triggers for those audits?
Nope, it's 750. So we have a single audit every year because just with our normal programs, we're over that. We have about 1.4 annually. So we always have a single audit. And we typically have 2 programs tested. It's usually, it rotates between special education and title, or title and child nutrition. It's almost always special education, but this year there's a much larger number of programs. And so I'm a little concerned about how that's gonna shake out, but we do have some that are larger. And so I'm hoping that they, and from their perspective, right, they're not looking to test 18 programs, right? They're trying to find the ones with the biggest dollar to meet that threshold on their end as well. But that's really, until we get through having all the numbers together and pull that federal expenditure spreadsheet together, it's hard to know.
Any more questions or comments? Julie?
Well, I appreciate Amy's question about, do we consider looking at, another audit firm? And I really appreciate Val articulating, why we have worked with Clifton Larson Allen. And I know sitting through, having had a lot of their presentations, I think that the experience they have with our district and the history and the performance that they have always done and their great work, I really don't think we can ever overvalue that. And additionally, I would be really concerned about the level of work that it would require Val to get a new audit firm. I think that, yes, those are intangible costs, but they are real as well. So, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Questions or comments? Okay. So we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion passes. Finally, tonight we have a resolution. Anita, that'll be a roll call vote. Okay. Establishing the dates for filing affidavits of candidacy. So I'll need a motion to approve the resolution establishing dates for filing affidavits of candidacy as presented. Okay, moved by Tom, second by Corey. Okay, are there any comments or any additional comments?
Just simply for the public, there are several seats up for board election this year. We have 3 seats available. And the filing period is from Tuesday, August 2nd, and it closes at 5 p.m. on Tuesday, August 16th. And that there is a $2 filing fee. So just for people who have an interest, August 2nd through the 16th, and we will have 3 seats on the ballot in November.
And they go to the district office to file.
Correct. File in the district office.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Anita, will you facilitate?
Broniak,
Aye.
Butler,
Aye.
Gurwitz,
Aye.
Gonzalez, George,
Aye.
Pritchard,
Aye.
Cornell,
Aye.
Stratmon.
Okay, motion or resolution passes. Thank you, Anita. Okay, we're going to move on to items for information, but I did want to say thank you again to the policy committee for all their work on the handbooks. Thank you for that. And Dr. Hillman, you have an end of the year enrollment report?
I do. So in your pack, in the table file tonight, it was the end of the year enrollment report. So you will see that we are actually with the full-time only, excluding the early childhood and part-time or independent study ALC students. We had the same number of students as we did on May 2nd, 3,781. We look at the grand total, which includes, of course, early childhood and those part-time or independent study ALC students. We actually increased by 10 over the previous month. So that is our end of year enrollment report.
Okay, comments or questions? Okay, we are on to future meetings, and they will be Monday, July 11th, August 8th, and August 22nd, all at 6 p.m. in the district office boardroom. Is there a motion to adjourn? Moved by Noel, second by Amy. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed? Okay, motion carries. We are adjourned.